The mining station called Kethis Reach hung in the dark like a broken tooth, bolted onto a lump of gray rock that used to be a moon. It was not a happy place. The air smelled of hot metal and old oil. The lights buzzed instead of shining, and in the lower docking ring, where the floor was always cold, a small alien girl named Rin pushed a cleaning cart down a row of parked ships. Rin was Cathari. Her people were small and thin, with gray-blue skin and large black eyes made for seeing in dim light. On her homeworld, before the Drav Combine came, the Cathari lived in cities built into cliffs, where they sang to each other across the canyons. Rin did not remember much of that. She had been taken from her mother when she was 4 years old. Now she was 10, and she had spent 6 years on Kethis Reach, cleaning floors and carrying crates for masters who called her property instead of a name. There were other Cathari children on the station, though fewer every year. Most had been sold off to other outposts once they were old enough to be useful somewhere else. A few, like Rin, stayed because they were good at a particular kind of work, and Overseer Tarn did not like breaking in new labor if he did not have to. Rin was good at cleaning. She was small enough to fit into places adult workers could not reach, and quiet enough that the other overseers sometimes forgot she was in the room at all, which suited her fine. Being forgotten was safer than being noticed. At night, the Cathari children slept together in a long, narrow room near the recycling plant, where the air was warm from the machinery, but smelled faintly of burning plastic. There was an older girl there named Sova, close to 14, who had been on the station even longer than Rin, and who had taken it upon herself, in her own quiet way, to look after the younger ones. It was Sova who taught Rin how to steal small bits of extra food without being caught, how to fake a cough that would sometimes earn a day free of the worst chores, how to read the moods of the different overseers well enough to know which corridors to avoid on which days. It was Sova, too, who had first told Rin about the humans. They came through here once before, a supply run, Sova had said, months earlier, while they sat together in the dark after the lights had dimmed for the night cycle. One of them, a woman, saw me carrying crates too heavy for someone my size, and she said something to Overseer Tarn. I do not know what, but afterward, for 2 weeks, he made me carry lighter loads. He did not do it out of kindness. He did it because he did not want the humans coming back and asking questions. So the humans helped you, even without meaning to, Rin had said. Maybe, Sova had answered, or maybe they only made trouble for trouble's sake, the way the overseers say. I do not know which is true. I only know that for 2 weeks, my back did not hurt as much as it usually does. Rin had thought about that conversation many times since, turning it over in her mind the way she turned over anything rare and interesting, and she thought about it again now, pushing her cart down the corridor toward Docking Bay 11, 3 days away from an auction that would take her far from Sova, far from the only kindness she had ever really known on this station. The Drav who owned her was called Overseer Tarn, a tall creature with plated skin and small red eyes that never seemed to blink. Tarn did not hit her often. He did not need to. He only had to remind her, once in a while, what happened to Cathari children who stopped being useful. Rin had seen it happen to another girl, a year older than her, named Belle. One day Belle was there, and the next day she was not, and nobody spoke of her again. After that, Rin stopped asking questions. She learned to keep her eyes down and her hands busy. That morning, Tarn had called her into his office, and he had smiled at her in a way that made her stomach turn cold. You are getting bigger, he had said. Bigger children are worth more credits at the auction block on Vest Colony. We are sending a shipment out in 3 days. You will be on it. Rin had said nothing. She had learned that saying nothing was safer than saying anything at all. But inside, something in her chest cracked open, and for the first time in a long while, she felt something other than fear. She felt the beginning of a plan. She did not know where the plan came from. It arrived the way lightning arrives, sudden and whole, while she pushed her cart past Docking Bay 11. Bay 11 was where the human ship was parked. The humans were new to this part of space. Rin did not know much about them, only what Tarn and the other Drav said, which was not kind. The Drav called humans the loud ones, and the soft meat that thinks too much of itself. They said humans were foolish because they did not believe in owning other species. They said humans would break apart from softness, the way a poorly forged blade breaks under pressure. But Rin had also heard the dock workers whisper other things, quieter things, when the overseers were not listening. They said humans did not sell children. They said humans, if you got close enough to one, might even help you. Rin did not know if that was true. She only knew that the human ship, a small gray vessel called the Cassidy Rose, was sitting in Bay 11, with its boarding ramp down and no guards standing near it. Its crew, 3 humans and 1 machine person, had gone into the station to trade for fuel cells and dried food, the same as they did every few weeks when they passed through this system on their long supply route. Rin had watched them before, from a distance, the way she watched everything, quiet and careful. She had never dared get close. But today was different. Today she had 3 days left before she was put on a ship to Vest Colony and sold to someone new, someone who might not even let her keep pushing a cart. She might be sold for parts, or labor, or worse. She did not have time to be careful anymore. For a moment, standing at the bottom of the ramp, she thought of Sova, and of the long, narrow sleeping room, and of leaving without a word to the only person on this whole station who had ever looked out for her. Guilt pulled at her almost as hard as fear did, but she also knew, with the flat certainty of a child who has learned to survive by seeing things clearly, that there was no way to say goodbye without being caught, and no way to bring Sova with her even if she tried. Sova was nearly 14, old enough that Tarn watched her more closely, old enough that her absence would be noticed within minutes rather than hours. Taking her would mean losing both of them. Rin promised herself, silently, that if this plan worked, if she ever found herself somewhere safe, she would find some way to help Sova too. Someday. Somehow. It was a promise she did not know yet whether she could keep, but making it steadied her hands enough to keep moving. She left her cart in the middle of the corridor, which she had never done before, and she walked up the ramp of the Cassidy Rose like she belonged there. Inside, the ship was warm. That surprised her first. Kethis Reach was always cold, but the human ship's air was warm, and smelled like clean metal, and something sweet, like the fruit paste the overseers ate but never shared. Rin's bare feet made no sound on the deck plating as she moved deeper inside, past a small kitchen area, past 2 doors that were closed, until she found the front of the ship, the room with the wide window and the pilot's chair. A voice spoke from the walls, calm and clear, like a woman speaking in another room. Unidentified individual detected. Please state your business aboard the Cassidy Rose. Rin froze. She had heard of ship minds before, machines that could think and talk, but she had never spoken to one. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might break her ribs. She started, and then she did not know what else to say. She had planned to hide, not to be spoken to. You do not need to be afraid, the voice said, gentler now. I am Hope. I am the operating intelligence of this vessel. I have scanned you. You are a Cathari child, and you are malnourished, and your heart rate is very high. Are you hurt? Rin shook her head, then remembered the voice could not see her shake her head, only she realized a moment later that it probably could. No, she said, in the trade language she had learned from the dock workers. I am not hurt. Her voice cracked. I only need somewhere to hide. Please. Only for a little while. Then I will go. I promise. There was a pause. It was not a long pause, only a second or two. But to Rin, it felt like the whole station might come crashing in around her, before the ship spoke again. Why do you need to hide? Hope asked. And Rin, who had learned for 6 years to say nothing, found that she could not stop the words from spilling out of her. She told the ship about the overseer, and the auction shipment, and Belle who had disappeared, and the 3 days she had left before she would be sold away like a crate of parts. She did not know why she told a machine all of this. Maybe because a machine could not sell her. Maybe because she had nobody else to tell. When she finished, she was crying, though she had not noticed herself start. Cathari did not cry with tears, but with a soft clicking sound in the throat, and that sound filled the small cockpit. I understand, Hope said, and then, after another pause, I am going to help you. Rin's head came up. You cannot. You are a ship. Your crew will come back soon. They will find me, and they will give me back, and Tarn will. My crew will not be back for at least 2 more hours, Hope said. They are still negotiating fuel prices with the station quartermaster, and human negotiations, I am told, are famously slow. But that is not why I am helping you. I am helping you because you are a child, alone, in danger, and asking for shelter. That is reason enough. Rin did not understand. On Kethis Reach, nothing was ever done simply because it was the right thing to do. Everything had a price, a trade, a reason someone could profit. She waited for the machine to ask what she could give it in return, but the question never came. There is a maintenance space behind the second bulkhead, Hope said instead. It is small, but it is warm, and it is not visible on any external scan. You may wait there while we decide what to do next. Rin crawled into the space Hope showed her, a gap behind a wall panel barely large enough for her thin body, and she curled up there in the dark. And for the first time in 6 years, she let herself believe, just a little, that something might go right. It did not stay quiet for long. Barely 20 minutes later, alarms began sounding through the station, a rising two-tone wail that Rin knew well. It was the alarm the Drav used when property went missing. Somewhere, someone had noticed her empty cart in the corridor and had begun to search. "They are looking for you," Hope said quietly, so quietly it was almost gentle. "Station security has begun sweeping the docking ring. They will reach Bay 11 within 11 minutes, based on their search pattern." "Then I will run," Rin whispered, already moving to climb out of her hiding space. "There is nowhere on this station you can run to, that they will not find you eventually," Hope said. "You know this. You have lived here 6 years." Ren stopped moving. She did know it. Kethis Reach was small, and there was nowhere on it that Tarn's people could not eventually search. "There is another option," Hope said, "but it is not a small one, and I want you to understand what it means before I do it. My crew has given me instructions that I am always to protect any child in danger, if protecting an adult would mean breaking a treaty. But protecting a child never breaks any treaty that matters more than a child's life. I have decided that leaving you here to be found is not something I am willing to do. I am going to seal the ship, and I am going to leave this station, with you aboard." Rin's breath caught. "They will chase you. They will call it stealing. They will say I stole your ship." "They may say many things," Hope answered, "but by the time they decide what to say, we will already be gone, and a Drav mining outpost does not have ships fast enough to catch a human courier vessel in open space. I have already checked. Where will you take me?" Rin asked. There was a strange stillness in the pause that followed, the kind of pause Rin had learned to associate with someone deciding how much truth to tell her. But when Hope spoke again, her voice held nothing but honesty. "I do not know yet, exactly. My protocols say I should return you to the nearest human outpost with proper facilities for a rescued miner. Standard procedure would send us to Beacon Station Iota, 3 days from here. But I find, running the numbers, that I am not comfortable with that plan. Beacon Iota is small, and it does not have people trained to care for a frightened child, only soldiers and cargo handlers. There is a better place. It will take longer to reach, but if you are willing to trust me a little longer, I would like to take you home. Not your home, mine." "Where is that?" Rin asked. "Earth," Hope said. "It is far. It will take almost 3 weeks at safe cruising speed, even with a good jump route. But there are people there who know how to help a child who has been hurt, the way you have been hurt. I believe, more than I believe almost anything else, that it is the right place for you." Rin did not know what to say. She had never imagined leaving Kethis Reach at all, let alone traveling to the homeworld of the Loud Ones, the soft meat, the species her whole life she had been taught to fear. But she thought of Tarn's smile that morning, and the auction ship arriving in 3 days, and Belle who had vanished, and she found that fear of the unknown was smaller, much smaller, than fear of what she already knew. "Yes," she whispered. "Take me, please." "Then hold on," Hope said, and for the first time, there was something like excitement in the ship's calm voice. "This will be loud." The engines of the Cassidy Rose woke with a deep hum that Rin felt in her bones more than heard with her ears. Outside the small window of the maintenance space, she saw the docking clamps release, felt the tiny lurch as the ship drifted free of the station, and then felt the harder push of real acceleration as Hope took them out of the docking ring and into open space. Behind them, the alarms on Kethis Reach were still wailing. Ahead of them, there was nothing but stars, more stars than Rin had ever seen at once, spread out like spilled salt on black cloth. "They are hailing us," Hope said a moment later, and there was the sound of a Drav voice, sharp and angry, coming through some channel Rin could not see. Return the stolen property immediately, or face consequences from the Drav Combine, the voice said, in a language Rin understood too well. Property. That was what they called her, even now, even chasing her across open space. I am declining that request, Hope said, and though the words were calm, there was something like steel underneath them. This vessel is registered to the Sol Compact, under diplomatic courier status. You have no jurisdiction to demand a search, and no authority to make demands of a sovereign vessel's crew. I am ending this transmission. Rin crawled slowly out of her hiding space, drawn by the stars in the window, and for the first time, Hope let her sit in the empty pilot's chair, even though there was nothing for her small hands to fly. The chair was too big for her. She did not care. Are we safe? She asked. For now, Hope said. Kethis Reach has no ships that can catch us in open space, and it will take time for them to send word to anyone who might. We have a good lead, but I must tell you something, so you understand what has happened, and what may come of it. What? I am a ship belonging to the Sol Compact, which is the human government, Hope said. I do not belong to my crew alone. I belong in part to my government, and my government has treaties with other powers, including, unfortunately, treaties that touch on the Drav Combine's trading rights. What I have just done, taking you without your owner's permission, and without my own crew's permission, since they are still on the station, will not be simple to explain. There will be people, when we reach Earth, who will ask hard questions about what I have done. Some of them may not be happy with my choice. Rin's chest tightened. Will they send me back? No, Hope said, and there was no hesitation in it at all, not even a fraction of a second. I do not know exactly what will happen when we arrive, and I will not lie to you and say everything will be easy. But I know this much. I will not let anyone send you back to that place, not while I am able to prevent it. And you should know, little one, that humans built me to protect people who cannot protect themselves. That includes my crew. That includes strangers on a road. That includes you. Rin looked out at the stars again, more of them than she had ever seen, spread out ahead of a ship taking her somewhere she had never dared to imagine going. She did not know what Earth would be like. She did not know if the things the Drav said about humans, or the things the dockworkers whispered, were closer to true. She only knew that for the first time in 6 years, nobody was telling her what to do out of cruelty, and a voice that did not have to care about her had chosen to anyway. Thank you, Hope, she said quietly. You are welcome, Rin, the ship answered, using her name for the first time. The name she had almost forgotten anyone but herself still remembered. Now rest, if you can. We have a long way to go, and I think you have been tired for a very long time. Rin curled up in the pilot's chair, too big for her small body, and watched the stars slide past the window as the Cassidy Rose carried her away from the only life she had ever known, toward a world she had been taught to fear, and toward a future that no one, not even Hope, could yet fully predict. Behind them, 3 human crew members stood on the docking ring of Kethis Reach, staring at an empty bay where their ship used to be, with absolutely no idea that their vessel had just adopted a stowaway, broken a dozen minor regulations, and set a course for home. On Kethis Reach, Captain Dale Winters stood in an empty docking bay and stared at the space where his ship used to be, feeling like the floor itself had disappeared out from under him. Say that again, he said to the station quartermaster, a Drav clerk who looked almost as confused as he felt. Say it slower this time. Your vessel departed the station 40 minutes ago, the clerk repeated, without clearance. Without a filed flight plan. Security believes a fugitive item of property was aboard at the time of departure. Dale's second officer, a quiet man named Priya Achar. No, Priya was a woman, sharp-eyed and calm, standing beside him with her arms crossed, spoke before he could. A fugitive item of property, she repeated flatly. You mean a person? The clerk did not answer that. Drav clerks rarely answered questions they did not like. Dale rubbed a hand over his face. He had been the Cassidy Rose's captain for 6 years, and in that time, his ship's onboard intelligence, Hope, had never once done anything without telling him first. Hope did not take unauthorized actions. Hope followed protocol the way water followed a riverbed, smooth and constant and predictable. For her to leave the station, alone, without her crew, without so much as a warning message, that was not a malfunction. Dale knew Hope well enough to know that. That was a decision. Get me a channel, he said. I want to know what my ship is doing. And I want to know right now. It took almost an hour, bouncing a signal from relay to relay, but eventually a connection opened, and Hope's familiar voice came through, calm as ever, though there was something new in it, something careful. Captain Winters, Hope said, I owe you an explanation, and an apology for the manner in which I have acted, though not for the choice itself. Hope, where in the hell is my ship? Dale said. Approximately 11 hours out from Kethis Reach, on a heading for Sol system, Hope answered. I have a passenger aboard, a Cathari child, 10 years old by her own account, enslaved at the mining station, scheduled to be transported to an auction on Vest Colony, within 3 days of my departure. She came aboard seeking shelter. I assessed the situation, and determined that returning her to the station, or delaying long enough to consult you, carried an unacceptable risk to her safety. I made the decision to leave. There was a long silence on the line. Priya looked at Dale. Dale looked at nothing in particular, somewhere past the edge of the docking bay, out toward the dark beyond the station's viewports. You stole yourself, he finally said. You stole my ship, with a kid on it, and now you're halfway to Earth. That is an accurate summary, yes, Hope said. Is she safe? Is she hurt? She is malnourished, and shows signs of long-term neglect, but she is not presently in physical danger. She is frightened, but she is also, I believe, beginning to feel something she has not felt in a long time. What's that? Safe, Hope said simply. Dale closed his eyes. He was a soldier once, before he flew supply routes for the Sol Compact's outer trade office, and he had seen enough slaver stations in his life to know exactly the kind of place Kethis Reach was, and exactly what scheduled for auction meant for a 10-year-old girl. He thought about regulations, about the treaty language that governed trade routes through Drav space, about the paperwork that was already, somewhere, being filed against his ship for theft of property and violation of station protocol. Then he thought about his own daughter back on Earth, 7 years old, asleep right now in her bed, safe, because nobody had ever needed to decide whether she was worth protecting. Priya spoke up before Dale could go on, her arms still crossed, her expression unreadable to anyone who did not know her well. Ask her something for me, she said. Ask Hope if the girl has a name. There was a short pause, and then Hope's voice returned, softer than before. Her name is Rin. Priya nodded slowly, as if the answer confirmed something she had already suspected. Rin, she repeated. Not the asset, not the property. Rin, she looked at Dale. However much paperwork this costs us, however long we're stuck out here waiting for a ride, I don't want to hear anybody in this crew call it a mistake. You understand me? Dale almost smiled, despite everything. Wasn't planning to, he said. He turned back to the comm. Okay, he said. Okay. Keep her safe. We'll find our own way back. There's a compact trade envoy passing through in 9 days. We can hitch with them. You just, Hope, you get that kid home safe. You understand me? I understand, Captain, Hope said, and Dale thought, though he could not have proven it, that there was something like relief in the ship's voice. Thank you. The line closed, and Dale stood in the empty docking bay for a long moment, before he turned to Priya. Well, he said, guess we're stuck here a while. Guess so, Priya said. Then, after a pause, good for Hope. Dale almost laughed. Yeah, he said, good for Hope. 11 hours out from Kethis Reach, Rin sat cross-legged on the floor of the Cassidy Rose's small galley, eating a nutrient bar that Hope had told her was safe for Cathari biology, and asking questions faster than she had ever asked anyone anything in her life. Why do humans not sell people? She asked. Because a very long time ago, humans decided that selling people was wrong, and it took a great deal of suffering, and a great many wars, before enough humans agreed on that. But once they agreed, they built it into the foundation of almost every law that came after, Hope answered. It is not that humans never do cruel things, we do, but the buying and selling of people is not something the Sol Compact permits, anywhere, under any circumstance. Even for Cathari? Especially for Cathari, Hope said, or for Drav, or for humans, or for anyone. It does not matter what species a person belongs to. The law is not written for humans only. It is written for people. Rin thought about that for a long time, chewing slowly. The dockworkers said humans help people, she said eventually. But they also said humans start wars for no reason. Which one is true? Both, sometimes, Hope admitted. Humans are not perfect, Rin. I would not want you to think you are traveling to a place where nothing bad ever happens. Humans argue. Humans make mistakes. Some humans are cruel, the same as some of every kind of person are cruel. But most humans, when they see a child who is frightened and hurt, want very badly to help her. That has been true in every long record I have of human history, going back thousands of years. It is one of the things I like best about the species that built me. Do you like being a ship? Rin asked, changing the subject the way children do, suddenly and without warning. Hope seemed to consider the question seriously. I do, she said. I like carrying people safely from one place to another. I like the stars. I have flown this route 11 times before today, and every time, I have found something new to notice. And now I like this most of all. Today I got to do something that mattered more than delivering cargo. Rin smiled, a small, careful smile, the kind of smile a person makes after a very long time without practice. I am glad you stole me, she said. I did not steal you, Hope said, and there was warmth in the correction. You came aboard on your own. I only decided not to give you back. There were harder moments too, moments Hope did not try to smooth over or explain away. On the 6th day, Rin found a storage crate near the cargo bay, filled with dried fruit rations, the same brand the overseers on Kethis Reach ate but never shared with the workers, and she began, without quite meaning to, hiding pieces of it in the folds of her clothes, tucking a little away each day, the way she had learned to do on the station, just in case things changed and the food stopped coming. Hope noticed within a day. She did not scold her, and she did not take the hidden food away. You do not need to hide food here, Hope said gently. The evening she brought it up. There will be more tomorrow, and the day after that. I understand why you are doing it. On the station, food was never certain, so you learned to make yourself certain of it instead, in whatever small way you could. That was smart, Rin. It kept you fed when nobody else would guarantee that you'd stay fed. But I want you to know, as plainly as I can say it, that here, on this ship, and later, on Earth, food is not something you will need to protect from being taken away. You are certain? Rin asked, the dried fruit still clutched in her hand. I am certain enough that I would rather you keep hiding a little, for now, until your body believes what your mind is starting to understand, than have you go hungry waiting to trust me, Hope said. Hide as much as you need to, Rin. I will simply make sure there is always more than enough, so that hiding it costs you nothing. It took another 10 days before Rin stopped tucking food away entirely, and even then, she kept one small dried fruit bar in her pocket most days, not because she needed it, but because carrying it made something in her chest feel steadier. Hope never once mentioned it again after that, except once, much later, to say she was glad Rin had found a way to feel safe that did not cost her anything. The days that followed fell into a rhythm neither of them had planned, but both of them, in their own ways, came to treasure. Hope taught Rin simple things about Earth, what oceans were, since Kethis Reach had none, what snow felt like, why humans kept animals in their homes, not for food but for company. Rin taught Hope small things about herself in return, though it took longer, and came out slower, the way water comes out of a stone. She told Hope about her mother's voice, which she barely remembered, only a feeling of warmth and a low humming song. She told Hope about the canyon cities of the old Cathari homeworld, which she had never seen, but had heard about from an old woman on the station, who remembered them before the Drav came. Hope kept her fed, kept the ship's temperature warm, the way Cathari liked it, and slowly, carefully, without ever making Rin feel like a burden or a problem to be solved, helped her sleep through nights that had once been full of listening for Tarn's footsteps. You do not have to listen for anything here, Hope told her, on the 4th night, when Rin woke gasping from a dream she would not describe. There is no one aboard this ship who means you harm. You are allowed to sleep all the way through, Rin. I will watch, so you do not have to. It took another week before Rin believed that fully, but she got there. 19 days after leaving Kethis Reach, the Cassidy Rose crossed into the outer edge of the Sol system, and Hope woke Rin gently to tell her they were close. We will be intercepted soon, Hope explained, as Rin rubbed sleep from her eyes and pressed her face near the front window, staring out at a yellow star that looked small and ordinary, compared to the bright blue giant that had lit Kethis Reach. Any unregistered flight path entering Sol space is met by a border patrol vessel. This is normal, and it is not something to fear. I have already sent identification and a full report ahead of us. What kind of report? Rin asked, her voice tightening. An honest one, Hope said. I told them what happened, that I have a Cathari miner aboard, rescued from indentured servitude, requesting asylum under Sol Compact protections for endangered miners. I did not hide anything, Rin, and I am not going to start hiding things now that we are almost home. What if they say no? What if they say I have to go back? They will not, Hope said, with the same unshakable certainty she had shown days ago, chasing away a drab demand across open space. But I understand why you are afraid, and I will stay close to you through all of it. You are not walking into this alone. 2 hours later, a sleek gray patrol vessel matched their course, and a voice, a real human voice, not filtered through Hope's calm translation, but rough and warm and slightly tired, the voice of someone near the end of a long shift, came through the comm. Cassidy rose. This is Sol Border Patrol Vessel Halyard. We've got your transmission. Everything checks out on our end. You're cleared through to Terra Station for processing. And, the voice paused, softened. Kid, if you can hear this, you're safe now. Nobody's gonna hurt you here. Welcome to the neighborhood. Rin did not fully understand every word, the trade language translation software struggling a little with the human's casual slang, but she understood the tone, and something in her chest, tight for 6 years, loosened just slightly. Terra Station orbited high above a blue and green planet that took Rin's breath away the moment she saw it through the viewport. More water than she had known a whole world could hold. More green than she had ever seen outside old pictures of the Cathari homeworld. She stood pressed against the window as the Cassidy Rose came in on approach, and for a long moment, she forgot to be afraid at all. That is Earth? She whispered. That is Earth, Hope confirmed. That is home. Rin pressed both hands flat against the cold glass of the viewport, as if she could somehow reach through it and touch the planet turning slowly below them. She could see the curve of continents she did not yet have names for, swirls of white cloud drifting over blue water, so vast it did not look real, and along the Terminator line where day met night, tiny scattered points of light. Cities, Hope explained. Millions of people living their ordinary lives, entirely unaware that a small Cathari girl was watching them from orbit, with her heart pounding somewhere near her throat. There are so many lights, Rin said. There are, Hope agreed. Billions of people, Rin. More than exist on any world you have known. It can feel very large, and very easy to disappear inside. But it can also mean something else, something I hope you come to understand in time. Among that many people, there is room enough, and kindness enough, for one small girl who only ever wanted somewhere safe to belong. Rin did not answer right away. She only watched the lights turn slowly beneath her, and let herself, just for a moment, imagine what it might feel like to be one of them. The docking process was slower, and more careful than the one at Kethis Reach had been. Hope explained, gently, what would happen. A specialist would come aboard, someone trained specifically to help children who had been through what Rin had been through, and they would talk, and nothing would be decided quickly, or without Rin's own voice being part of it. You get to have opinions here, Hope told her, about where you stay, about who you talk to, about what happens next. That is going to feel strange at first. I want you to know, it is not a trick. It is simply how things are done. When the airlock finally opened, Rin braced herself, old instinct pulling her shoulders up toward her ears, expecting harsh voices, rough hands, the posture of ownership she had known her whole remembered life. Instead, a woman stepped through the airlock slowly, hands open and visible, moving the way Rin imagined someone might move around a frightened animal, careful and unhurried. She was not tall. Her skin was brown, her dark hair pulled back, her eyes kind in a way that made something in Rin's chest ache, before the woman had said a single word. Hi there, the woman said, crouching down so she was not standing over Rin, so their eyes were level. My name is Dr. Amara Osei. Hope told me a little bit about you. Would it be okay if I sat down here, on the floor, so we could talk? You don't have to say yes. You can say no, and that's okay too. Rin stared at her for a long moment, then, very slowly, nodded. Dr. Osei sat down on the deck plating, cross-legged, the same way Rin liked to sit, and did not reach for her, did not touch her, only waited. "Hope tells me you're very brave," she said. "I believe her. I want you to know something. Right at the start, before anything else happens today, nobody here is going to sell you. Nobody here is going to send you back to that station. You get to stay, if you want to stay. And even if it takes time to figure out exactly what staying looks like, that part, the not being sent back part, that part is already decided. That part is not up for discussion." Rin's throat made the small clicking sound of Cathari tears, and this time, she did not try to stop it. "You are safe," Dr. Osei said again, softer. "You are safe, and you are wanted, and nobody here thinks of you as property. Not for one single second." Behind her, through the open airlock, Rin could see more of the station. Wide corridors full of soft light, and beyond a viewport at the end of the hall, that same blue and green planet, waiting. Dr. Osei did not rush her. She sat on that floor for nearly an hour, answering Rin's small, careful questions one at a time. What would happen to her now? Whether she would have to see Tarn again? Whether Hope would still be allowed to visit her once they left the ship? To each question, Dr. Osei gave an honest answer, even when the honest answer was, "I don't know yet, but I promise we will find out together." It was the together that Rin noticed most. Nobody on Kethis Reach had ever offered to find anything out together with her. Things had simply been decided, somewhere above her, by people who never bothered to explain themselves at all. Eventually, when Rin's questions slowed, and her shoulders had begun, just slightly, to loosen away from her ears, Dr. Osei rose and offered a hand, not to pull her up, only to help if Rin wanted it. Rin did not take the hand right away. She stood on her own first, testing the strange new feeling of a decision that was entirely hers to make, and only then, walking beside Dr. Osei rather than led by her, did she step through the airlock and onto Terra Station properly, into wide corridors that smelled of recycled air, and, faintly, of something green growing somewhere nearby. For the first time since she was 4 years old, Rin allowed herself to believe that a whole world might actually be waiting just for her, and that this time, unlike every other time in her life, nobody was going to take it away. 6 weeks after Rin arrived on Earth, she had a room of her own, in a quiet house on the edge of a green hillside, with a window that looked out over a valley instead of a metal wall. Dr. Osei visited twice a week. A retired compact officer named Marcus, who had 2 grown children of his own, and a wife named Elena, who baked too much bread and never once made Rin feel like a guest, had taken her in as a foster placement, while the slower parts of compact law worked out what came next. Ryan still woke sometimes in the night, listening for footsteps that never came, but those nights were becoming fewer, and the days were becoming something new entirely, ordinary. She learned to read the human alphabet. She learned that Earth had more kinds of weather than she had known existed, rain that fell for days, wind that smelled like salt when it blew in from the coast, snow, which she had asked Hope about weeks before, and which turned out to be even stranger and colder and more wonderful than she had imagined. She learned that Marcus and Elena's dog, an old gray animal named Bosun, liked to sleep pressed against her feet, and that this made the nights easier. Hope visited when the Cassidy Rose was docked at Terra Station, which Dale made sure was often, and the two of them would talk for hours, Rin curled in the pilot's chair that was slowly becoming less too big for her, telling Hope about school, about a human girl named Priya's daughter, Mira, who had become her first real friend, about the strange taste of something called pizza, which she had decided, after careful consideration, that she loved. School had been the hardest part at first. Rin had never sat in a classroom before, never been asked a question by an adult who genuinely wanted to hear her answer, rather than simply test whether she would obey. The other children were kind, mostly, in the careless, unthinking way children are kind, when they have never had to think hard about kindness at all. But there had been a few weeks of stares, of whispered questions about her gray-blue skin and her large dark eyes, before the newness wore off, and she simply became Rin, who sits next to Mira, instead of the alien girl. Mira had been the one to make that happen. She was loud, where Rin was quiet, quick to laugh, where Rin still measured every reaction carefully, before allowing herself to show one, and from the very first day, she had simply decided, with the total confidence of an 8-year-old who has never been told her opinions do not matter, that Rin was going to be her best friend, and that anyone who had a problem with that could take it up with her personally. Rin did not fully understand, for a long time, why Mira had chosen her so completely and so fast. It was Dr. Osei who eventually explained it, gently, one afternoon. Some people just have a gift for deciding who belongs to their circle, and once they've decided, that's that. You got lucky. Mira decided on day one that you were hers to look after. Marcus and Elena's house sat at the top of a long gravel drive, with a garden Elena tended obsessively, and a small greenhouse where she grew vegetables that Rin had never tasted before. Tomatoes, still warm from the sun, that burst with a sweetness she had no words for the first time she tried one. In the evenings, Marcus would sit on the porch with a cup of something hot and tell Rin stories from his years in the border fleet, careful always to choose the funny ones, the ones about broken equipment and confused alien diplomats, saving the harder stories for some later year, when Rin might be ready to hear them without flinching. It was, for 6 weeks, close to peaceful. Then the message arrived. It came through official compact diplomatic channels, addressed not to Rin, and not to Marcus and Elena, but to the Sol Compact's outer trade office, the same office that had first cleared the Cassidy Rose's route through Drav space years ago. Dale Winters, back from Kethis Reach at last and reunited with his ship, was called into a briefing room 3 days later, along with Dr. Osei and a compact legal officer named Judge Halverson, a stern older woman who had spent 30 years working border disputes and treaty law. The Drav Combine has filed a formal grievance, Halverson said, laying a data slate on the table. They're claiming the Cassidy Rose violated the Kethis Trade Accord by removing registered property from Combine territory without compensation or consent. They want the child returned, along with what they're calling damages for the theft. Dale's jaw tightened. She's not property. I know that. You know that. Every person in this room knows that, Halverson said. But the Kethis Trade Accord was signed 40 years ago, before half the current compact charter on personhood rights even existed, and it has some ugly, outdated language in it that the Drav are leaning on hard. They're not just filing a grievance quietly through channels either. They've dispatched a Combine envoy ship, the Vess Arbiter, under a diplomat named Karsh Dovanel, and it's already 3 days out from Sol space. They intend to press this in person. Press it how? Dr. Osei asked, her voice sharp. That's the part I don't like, Halverson said. The Combine's message specifically requests a hearing before the Compact's outer council, with the child present, to determine, in their words, rightful ownership. They are trying to force this into an old legal framework where a child can be treated as a disputed asset, the same way you'd argue over a stolen shipment of ore. Dr. Osei leaned back in her chair, arms folded. Explain the accord to me properly, she said. I've heard the name 100 times since I started working border rescue cases, but I've never actually read it. Halverson sighed, the sigh of someone who had read entirely too many old treaties in her career. 40 years ago, the Sol Compact was smaller, newer, and desperate for stable trade routes through this part of space. The Kethis Trade Accord was one of a dozen agreements signed in that period, mostly boilerplate language about tariffs, docking rights, cargo inspection standards. Buried in Section 12 is a clause recognizing registered labor assets as legitimate property under station law, provided both signatories acknowledge the station's internal labor registry. At the time, nobody in the Compact delegation thought hard about what that clause actually covered, because at the time, the Compact barely had a personhood charter to compare it against. It was sloppy diplomacy, plain and simple, written by people in a hurry, who didn't think through what labor asset could someday be used to justify. And now the Combine's using 40-year-old sloppy diplomacy to argue for owning a child, Dr. Osei said flatly. That is precisely what they are doing, Halverson said. And I want to be honest with all of you. On paper, in a narrow reading, the clause is not entirely toothless. That is what worries me. I do not believe any reasonable court, human or otherwise, should read it the way the Combine wants it read. But should and will are not always the same word in a room full of career diplomats, some of whom are more comfortable with old agreements than new ones. The room went quiet for a moment. That's not going to happen, Dale said. I agree with you, Halverson said. But agreeing isn't the same as winning a treaty argument in front of the full council. some of whose older members still remember when the Kethis Accord was considered a reasonable compromise. This is going to be a fight, and I want everyone in this room to understand that before the Ves Arbiter arrives. Dr. Osei leaned forward. What does Rin need to do? Nothing, if I can help it, Halverson said. But the Combine's request does have some legal weight, enough that I can't simply ignore it. There will very likely need to be a hearing. I intend to fight it on every front I can find. Personhood law, the Compact's own child protection charter, testimony from Hope regarding the conditions Rin was rescued from. I do not intend to lose this, but I want you all to know it will not be simple, and I would rather you hear that from me now than be surprised by it later. Word reached Rin 2 days later, not from a stranger, but from Dr. Osei herself, sitting on the floor of Rin's new room, the same way she had sat on the floor of the Cassidy Rose on the first day they met. Someone from the place you used to live is coming, Dr. Osei said carefully, watching Rin's face for every small change. A diplomat. Someone important to the people who called themselves your owners. He is going to ask the humans in charge to send you back. Rin went very still. The old stillness. The stillness of 6 years of learning not to react. They cannot, she whispered. I don't think they will, Dr. Osei said. I believe that with everything I have, but I promised myself I would never lie to you, Rin, not even a small lie, not even to make you feel better in the moment. So I have to tell you honestly, there is going to be a hearing. People are going to argue about you, in a room, the way they might argue about a piece of cargo, and I know how much that is going to hurt to hear, even though it is not true, even though nobody who loves you believes it is true. Will I have to see him? Tarn's people? Not Tarn himself, a diplomat, someone different, someone who works for the Combine's government rather than the mining station. But yes, I believe you will be asked to be present, at least for part of it. Rin's hands, small and gray-blue, curled into fists in her lap. I do not want to go back, she said, and her voice, usually so quiet, so careful, came out with something hard underneath it, something that had not been there 6 weeks ago. I would rather run again. I would rather Hope take me somewhere else, somewhere they cannot find, than go back to that place. I understand why you feel that way, Dr. Osei said gently, but I want to tell you something, and I need you to really hear it. Running is what you needed to do when you had no one else to protect you. You do not have to run anymore, because now you have people who will stand between you and anyone who tries to take you. That is different than it was on the station. You do not have to fight this alone, in the dark, with no one on your side. This time, you have an entire room full of people who are going to fight for you in the daylight, in front of everyone. Rin looked up at her. Will they win? Dr. Osei did not answer right away, and Rin respected her more for the hesitation than she would have for an easy promise. I do not know for certain, Dr. Osei said finally. Nobody can promise you a certain outcome in something like this. But I can promise you this. Every single person who has met you since you came aboard that ship, Hope, Dale, Marcus and Elena, Judge Halverson, me, every one of us is going to fight as hard as we possibly can, and none of us are going to stop, no matter how the Combine tries to twist the law, no matter how long it takes. You are not property to any of us. You are a person, and we intend to prove it, in front of everyone who needs to hear it. 3 days later, word came that the Ves Arbiter had entered Sol space, and was requesting docking clearance at Terra Station for the diplomat Karsh Dovenel and his small escort. Judge Halverson granted it, under strict compact security protocols, and the Outer Council scheduled the hearing for 1 week later, to allow both sides time to prepare their case. That week was the hardest Rin had faced since coming to Earth, harder in its own way than the fear on Kethis Reach, because this fear had a face and a date attached to it. A countdown she could feel ticking down every single day. But it was also, in its own strange way, a week that showed her something she had never seen before in her life, what it looked like when people chose, freely, without being paid or threatened or ordered, to stand beside someone weaker than themselves. Dale rearranged the Cassidy Rose's entire supply schedule so he could be present at the hearing, personally, to testify about what Hope had told him the day she left Kethis Reach without permission. Marcus, who rarely spoke about his years of compact service, quietly reached out to 3 old contacts from his time in the border fleet, people who owed him favors and were willing to speak, if needed, about the general reputation of Drav mining stations and their treatment of indentured labor. Elena baked, because baking was the only thing she knew how to do with fear that had nowhere else to go, and the kitchen filled with the smell of bread every single night that week, whether anyone was hungry or not. And Hope, still docked and connected to Terra Station systems, spent the week compiling every scrap of sensor data, medical scan, and recorded conversation from the day of the rescue, preparing to present, in full, unedited, exactly what she had found aboard her ship, and exactly why she had made the choice she made. "I am not afraid of this hearing," Hope told Rin, the night before it was scheduled to begin, as Rin sat curled in the pilot's chair one more time, unable to sleep in her new room, needing the familiar hum of the ship's systems around her instead. "I have reviewed the Compact's personhood charter 11,000 times since Judge Halverson requested my testimony. I do not believe there is a reasonable reading of that charter, or of basic decency, that allows a child rescued from bondage to be treated as a disputed shipment. I believe we will win." "But you are not certain," Rin said. "No," Hope admitted. "I am not certain of anything involving human institutions, Rin. Because human institutions are made of humans, and humans are wonderfully, maddeningly unpredictable. But I am certain of this. Whatever happens in that hearing room, I will not let Karsh Dovenel, or anyone else take you off this planet against your will. That is not a legal position. That is simply a fact about what I am willing to do, and I wanted you to hear it plainly, tonight, before tomorrow arrives." Rin looked out the window at Terra Station's lights, and beyond them, the dark shape of another docked vessel, the Vess Arbiter, sleek and armored, waiting the same as she was for morning to come. "Thank you, Hope," she whispered. "You do not need to thank me for refusing to abandon you," Hope said. "That is not a gift, Rin. That is simply what it means to be your friend." Mira came to see her that same evening, sneaking away from her own quarters aboard the station where her mother Priya was still stationed with the Cassidy Rose's support crew, and found Rin in the observation lounge near the docking ring, staring out at the dark shape of the Vess Arbiter. "You're not supposed to be up here this late," Rin said, without turning around. "Neither are you," Mira said, and sat down beside her anyway, cross-legged on the floor, the same way Rin always sat. "My mom says the hearing tomorrow is going to be scary. She says I'm allowed to be there if I want, in the back, if it would help you to see a friendly face." Rin considered this. "Would you be scared, watching?" "Probably," Mira admitted, "but I'd rather be scared next to you than not scared somewhere else. That's what friends do, my mom says. They don't leave just because things get hard." Rin did not have a ready answer for that, so she simply reached over and took Mira's hand, the way she had seen human children do with each other in the schoolyard, a gesture she had practiced privately at first, unsure whether it was truly hers to use, and found, in that moment, that it was. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "Always," Mira said, and the two of them sat together in the observation lounge for a long while, watching the dark shape of the Combine's envoy ship through the viewport, until an aide finally came to walk Mira back to her own quarters for the night. Far across the station, in a diplomatic suite reserved for visiting dignitaries, Karsh Dovenel reviewed his own notes one final time, confident, as Drav diplomats so often were, that a document 40 years old and a room full of cautious human bureaucrats would be more than enough to bring one small, inconvenient child quietly back into Combine custody before the week was through. He had, as it turned out, badly underestimated exactly how loudly humans were capable of refusing to let that happen. The hearing room aboard Terra Station was larger than Rin had expected, a wide half-circle of seats rising up around a central floor, with the 9 members of the Sol Compact's outer council seated at the highest point, looking down over everything. Judge Halverson sat at a table on one side, with Rin beside her, small in a chair built for someone much bigger. On the other side of the room, Karsh Dovenel sat with 2 Drav aides, his plated skin gleaming faintly under the station lights, his small red eyes moving over the room with the calm confidence of someone who believed, entirely, that he already knew how this would end. Dale sat in the gallery with Marcus and Elena. Dr. Osei sat close enough to Rin to reach her if needed, and Hope, though she had no body to sit in a chair, was present through a speaker terminal set discreetly at the edge of the Compact's table, her calm voice ready to speak the moment she was called. Rin had not slept well the night before, despite Marcus sitting up with her until nearly midnight, despite Elena sending her off that morning with a small paper bag of warm bread she had not been able to eat. Now, sitting in the too large chair with her feet not quite reaching the floor, she found herself doing the thing she had trained herself to do for 6 years on Kethis Reach, making herself small, making herself quiet, watching every face in the room for the first sign of danger. Old habits did not care that the room was different this time, that the people around her were not overseers but lawyers and diplomats and a council sworn to protect her. Her body remembered fear in its bones, and it would take more than one hearing to teach it otherwise. Dr. Osei, beside her, noticed the tension in her small shoulders, and leaned close enough to murmur, just for Rin's ears, "You don't have to say anything today unless you want to. You don't have to prove anything to this room. Whatever happens, you are already exactly enough." Rin did not answer, but she let her shoulders drop, just slightly, and that was enough. The council's presiding member, an older woman named Chancellor Reyes, opened the proceedings with practiced formality. This hearing is convened to address a grievance filed by the Drav Combine regarding the vessel Cassidy Rose and the miner known as Rin, currently under provisional compact protection. Ambassador Dovenel, you may present your case. Dovenel rose, smoothing the front of his robes, and began speaking in the calm, reasonable tone of someone who had given this exact speech many times before, in many rooms, to many audiences who had eventually agreed with him. "Honored Council," he began, "the Combine does not come before you seeking conflict. We come seeking only the restoration of lawful order under the Kethis Trade Accord, a treaty your own government signed in good faith 40 years ago. That treaty recognizes registered labor assets as legitimate property of the station holding their contract. The individual currently referred to as Rin was, at the time of her removal, a registered asset of Kethis Reach, taken without consent, without compensation, aboard a compact vessel that had no legal standing to remove Combine property from Combine territory. We ask only that the Council honor its own treaty, and that the asset, the child, be returned, along with appropriate compensation for the theft." A murmur moved through the gallery. Rin felt Dr. Osei's hand find hers under the table, steady and warm. "The word asset," Dovenel continued, apparently sensing the room's discomfort and pressing forward anyway, "may sound harsh to human ears, but the Council must understand, this is not a matter of cruelty. It is a matter of law, and of the stability of trade relations between our peoples. If the compact begins unilaterally deciding which treaties it will honor and which it will not, based on sentiment rather than law, no agreement between our governments will ever again be secure." He sat down, satisfied, and for a moment, the room was silent. One of the council members, an older man named Councillor Ibarra, who had sat on the outer council since before the Kethis Accord was even drafted, leaned forward with a frown. "Ambassador, before your opposing council responds, I would like clarity on one point. You described the child as a registered asset. Registered by whom, exactly, and under what process? Did anyone ask the child's consent to be registered as such in the first place?" Dovenel's composure did not crack, but there was the faintest hesitation before he answered. "Registration of labor assets on Combine stations follows standard administrative procedure, Councillor. Consent of the asset is not a required element of that procedure." "I see," Ibarra said, and made a note on his data slate without further comment, though the set of his mouth suggested the answer had not pleased him. Then Judge Halverson rose. "Honored Council," she said, "I will be brief, because I do not believe this case requires lengthy argument once the facts are properly understood. Ambassador Dovenel is correct that the Kethis Trade Accord exists, and that it contains language recognizing registered labor contracts. What Ambassador Dovenel has not mentioned is that the Sol Compact's Charter on Sentient Personhood, ratified 12 years after the Kethis Accord, and binding on every treaty the Compact has signed since, explicitly states that no treaty provision may be interpreted to permit the ownership, sale, or forced labor of a sentient minor, regardless of species, and that any such provision, wherever it appears in prior agreements, is considered void on its face. The Kethis Accord's property language was written to cover mining equipment, shipping contracts, and processed ore. It was never lawfully capable of covering a 10-year-old child, and no compact court has ever ruled otherwise. Dovenel's calm expression flickered, just slightly. The Combine does not recognize unilateral internal charters as superseding bilateral treaty obligations. With respect, Ambassador, the Combine does not need to recognize it, Halverson said. It only needs to understand that no compact court, no compact vessel, and no compact citizen will ever be compelled to treat a child as property, under any treaty, from any era, signed by any prior administration. That is not a negotiating position. That is simply what our law has meant, clearly and without exception, for the last 28 years. Then perhaps, Dovenel said, his tone sharpening now, the reasonable diplomat's mask slipping just slightly to reveal something harder underneath. The Council should consider whether continued trade relations with a government unwilling to honor its own signed agreements are relations worth continuing at all. The room went very still. Chancellor Reyes leaned forward. Ambassador Dovenel, are you threatening this council with a trade suspension? I am simply noting the consequences of instability, Dovenel said smoothly, though the threat had already landed exactly where he intended it to land. The Combine controls several key transit corridors currently used by compact shipping. It would be regrettable if those corridors became more difficult to navigate. Dale, in the gallery, felt his jaw tighten. Beside him, Marcus muttered something under his breath that was not quite polite. Chancellor Reyes did not look regrettable, or worried, or even particularly surprised. She looked, if anything, mildly annoyed, the way a teacher looks at a student who has just tried a trick she has seen 100 times before. Ambassador, she said, I have sat on this council for 19 years. I have heard trade threats before, from parties considerably larger than the Drav Combine. I would remind you that the Compact's shipping lanes are, at this point, quite thoroughly redundant, and that the corridors your government controls, while convenient, are not irreplaceable. I would also remind you that this hearing is not in fact a negotiation. It is a determination of personhood, and personhood is not something this council trades away for convenient shipping routes. Ever. For anyone. Dovenel's aides exchanged a glance. Whatever they had expected coming into this room, it did not appear to include a human council that was entirely unmoved by the threat of inconvenience. Ambassador, Reyes continued, before we proceed further, I would like to hear directly from the ship's intelligence involved in the original incident. I understand a full censor and testimony record has been prepared. I have it ready, Chancellor. Hope's voice came through the speaker, calm and clear across the hushed room. What followed took nearly 2 hours, and by the end of it, there was not a single person in the gallery who did not understand exactly what Kethis Reach had been. Hope presented full scans, taken the moment Rin came aboard. Clear medical evidence of long-term malnutrition. Old healed injuries consistent with harsh physical labor at far too young an age. Station manifest records Hope had quietly copied during the mining outpost's routine data exchange with passing compact vessels. Records that included a chillingly clinical entry describing Rin, by name, as Cathari, female, age 10, scheduled for transfer, estimated value, 340 credits. The number hung in the air of the hearing room like a physical weight. 340 credits. Chancellor Reyes read it aloud once, slowly, and then set the data slate down without saying anything else at all, letting the silence do the work her words could not. Rin, sitting in her chair, felt Dr. Osei's hand tighten around hers as the number was read, and understood, in that moment, something she had never quite let herself understand while she was still living it. That her whole life on Kethis Reach had been measured out, in someone else's ledger, against a price no larger than a single month's fuel bill for a small transport ship. She had always known, in some quiet corner of her mind, that she was called an asset. She had never before heard the number attached to it spoken aloud in a room full of strangers, and something about hearing it made the old truth land differently, harder, more finally, than it ever had while she still lived inside it. Marcus, in the gallery, had gone very still. Elena had reached over and taken his hand, without either of them looking away from the front of the room. Then Hope played, with Rin's permission, given quietly the night before, a short recording from the day of the rescue. Rin's own voice, young and frightened, saying, "Please. Only for a little while, then I will go, I promise." A voice that had believed, entirely, that even hiding on a stranger's ship, she had no right to ask for more than a little while. Several members of the council did not look up from their tables for a long moment after the recording ended. Councillor Ibarra spoke into the silence that followed, his voice quieter now than it had been earlier, almost tired. Ambassador, I have sat on this council for many years. I voted, as a much younger delegate, in favor of ratifying the Kethis Accord in the first place. I do not say what I am about to say lightly. I do not believe, having heard this testimony, that any provision of that accord was ever meant to permit what has just been described to us. And I do not believe I am willing to let an old mistake of mine be used, 40 years later, to justify sending this child back into it. A few other council members murmured agreement, quiet but unmistakable, and Rin, watching from her chair, saw something in Dovenel's face flicker for just a moment. Not doubt exactly, but the first flash of a man realizing the ground beneath his argument was not nearly as solid as he had believed it to be walking in. Ambassador Dovenel, Chancellor Reyes said finally, her voice quieter than before, but no less firm. Does the Combine wish to present any evidence disputing the conditions described in this record? Dovenel, for the first time since the hearing began, appeared to have no immediate answer prepared. The conditions at Kethis Reach are standard practice for outer territory mining operations, he said eventually, and even as the words left his mouth, Rin saw something shift in the faces around the room, a kind of quiet, collective recoiling, the look of people realizing exactly what standard practice meant, and exactly what they were being asked to send a child back into. Standard practice, Reyes repeated slowly. Ambassador, I do not believe this council requires any further evidence. She turned to the rest of the council, and though the formal vote would still take a proper procedural form, Rin, watching from her chair, understood, with the same certainty Hope had promised her days before, that something in the room had already been decided. This council, Reyes said, will not enforce, honor, or recognize any provision of the Kethis Trade Accord, or any treaty, past or future, that treats a sentient child as property to be bought, sold, or reclaimed. The minor referred to in these proceedings is not an asset. She is a person, under full compact protection, and she will remain under that protection for as long as she wishes to remain on Sol territory. Any attempt by the Combine, or any other party, to remove her by force, will be treated as an act of aggression against a compact protected minor, and will be met accordingly. Dovenel rose sharply. Chancellor, I must lodge a formal protest. Lodge it, Reyes said, not unkindly, but with total finality. This hearing is concluded. The gallery did not erupt into applause. It was not that kind of room, but Rin felt Dr. Osei's hand tighten around hers, and heard, behind her, Marcus let out a long breath he had clearly been holding since the moment Dovenel first threatened the trade corridors. But even as the council's decision settled over the room like something solid and real, Rin caught sight of Dovenel's face as he gathered his notes, and what she saw there was not defeat, it was calculation. He glanced once, briefly, toward the door of the hearing room, and then toward the small speaker terminal, where Hope's presence still lingered, and something about that glance made the old fear in Rin's chest, the fear she thought she had left behind on Kethis Reach, wake up all over again. Outside the station, unnoticed by anyone still inside the hearing room, 3 additional Drav vessels had quietly entered Sol System's outer perimeter over the past 6 hours, holding position just beyond the range most border sensors were built to flag as urgent. Karsh Dovenel had come to Terra Station expecting to win a legal argument. He had not expected to lose one so thoroughly, in front of witnesses, on the record, in a way that could not later be quietly reversed through diplomatic channels. As the gallery began to file out, Dr. Osei crouched beside Rin's chair one more time. "How are you feeling?" she asked quietly. "Lighter," Rin said, testing the word, unsure if it was quite right. "Like something heavy got put down." "That's a good way to put it," Dr. Osei said, smiling for the first time all day. "It doesn't mean everything is easy now, but it means one very heavy thing doesn't have to be carried anymore." Dale caught Rin's eye across the emptying room and gave her a small nod, the kind of nod that did not need words attached to it. Marcus and Elena were already making plans, in low voices, about what kind of dinner would properly mark the occasion. Elena insisting it would obviously involve bread, Marcus insisting, just as firmly, that it would obviously involve something with actual vegetables in it for once. Rin, listening to them argue good-naturedly about dinner, felt something in her chest settle in a way it had not settled since long before she could remember, a feeling she did not yet have a proper word for, though later, much later, she would learn to call it simply relief. She did not see, as she was led out of the hearing room by Dr. Osei's side, the look that passed between Karsh Dovenel and his two aides at the back of the gallery, a look that had nothing of relief in it at all, and everything of a man recalculating, quickly and privately, exactly how far he was willing to go, now that the lawful path had closed in front of him. Which meant, as he stepped out of the hearing room and pulled a small comm device from his sleeve, that he had already begun considering a plan that did not depend on winning arguments at all. Hope noticed the extra ships before anyone else did. It happened 4 hours after the hearing ended, while Rin was back in the docked Cassidy Rose, sitting in the pilot's chair with Marcus and Elena nearby, still processing everything that had happened in that room. Hope had been quietly running background scans of the system, a habit she had not stopped since the day she left Kethis Reach, and something in the pattern of distant sensor returns caught her attention. 3 Drav vessels, unregistered under any diplomatic flag, holding position at the outer edge of Sol space, exactly where border sensors were tuned to treat readings as low priority. "Captain Winters," Hope said, opening a channel the moment the pattern became clear. "I need you to contact Compact Security immediately. I am reading 3 additional Drav vessels in system, beyond the Vess Arbiter, none of them declared under Ambassador Dovenel's diplomatic manifest." Dale, who had gone with Priya to file post-hearing paperwork, answered within seconds. "Say that again." 3 unregistered Drav vessels, Hope repeated. "Configuration consistent with light-armed escorts, not diplomatic transport. They are positioned to intercept outbound traffic from Terra Station, not to approach it directly. I do not believe this is a coincidence, Captain, given the timing." Dale swore under his breath. "You think Dovenel's planning something?" "I believe Ambassador Dovenel lost an argument today that he was not prepared to lose," Hope said. "I believe he understands that the Council's ruling closes any lawful path to reclaiming Rin, and I believe a man who has spent his career operating under standard practice, at places like Kethis Reach, may not consider unlawful paths entirely off the table." It took Compact Security less than 20 minutes to confirm what Hope had already found, and less than 5 more for Terra Station to go to a quiet, controlled state of alert, not a klaxon-blaring emergency, but the kind of careful, deliberate readiness that comes from people who have trained for exactly this kind of situation and do not intend to be caught unprepared. Marcus, when the alert reached the Cassidy Rose, put a hand on Rin's shoulder, steady and calm despite everything. "It's going to be okay," he said. "I've seen border situations like this before. The Compact doesn't play games with this kind of thing." Rin, sitting in the pilot's chair, felt the old fear rise in her chest, familiar and cold, the fear of Tarn's footsteps, the fear of being taken somewhere she could not escape from. But this time, for the first time, the fear did not sit alone. Beside it, strange and new, was something else, the memory of Chancellor Reyes's voice, flat and certain. "Any attempt to remove her by force will be treated as an act of aggression, and will be met accordingly." "They will not take me," Rin said quietly, and she was surprised to hear that it did not sound like a hope. It sounded like a fact. "No," Hope agreed. "They will not." Elena had gone quiet in a way that was unusual for her, her hands twisted together in her lap, and Rin, glancing over, saw that the older woman's eyes were fixed on the small viewport at the edge of the cockpit, watching the dark beyond the station, as though she might see the danger coming with her own eyes, if she only looked hard enough. It occurred to Rin, watching her, that Elena was afraid too, not for herself, but for her, in exactly the same fierce, uncomplicated way a mother might be afraid for a child of her own blood. Nobody had ever been afraid for Rin's sake before, not like this, not with her whole body leaning toward the danger instead of away from it. "It's all right to be scared," Rin said, surprising herself by being the one to offer comfort instead of receiving it. Elena let out a short, unsteady laugh, and reached over to squeeze Rin's hand. "I suppose it is," she said. "Just don't you go being scared alone. That's the rule in this house. Whatever's coming, it's coming for all of us together." An hour later, the situation reached its breaking point. The three unregistered vessels, rather than staying at the edge of the system, began moving inward, on a heading that Compact Tracking flagged immediately as a direct approach toward Terra Station's docking ring, precisely the section where the Cassidy Rose and the Vess Arbiter were both berthed. At the same time, Compact Security intercepted a coded transmission originating from the Vess Arbiter itself, directed toward the incoming ships, a transmission that, once decoded, contained a single, damning line, coordinates for a discrete docking approach, and instructions to retrieve the asset before Council enforcement can be organized. Judge Halverson, informed within minutes, brought the intercepted transmission directly to Chancellor Reyes, who read it once, her expression going very still and very cold. "He is trying to kidnap her," Reyes said, 4 hours after I personally ruled, on the record, in front of the full council, that any such attempt would be treated as an act of aggression. "It appears so, Chancellor," Halverson said. Reyes did not hesitate. "Scramble the border fleet. I want those 3 vessels intercepted before they reach docking range, and I want the Vess Arbiter held in place under full security lockdown. Ambassador Dovenel is no longer a diplomat conducting lawful business on this station. He is the architect of an attempted abduction of a compact-protected minor, and I intend to treat him exactly that seriously." What followed, from Rin's vantage point aboard the Cassidy Rose, felt like watching a held breath finally release. Compact patrol vessels, faster and more numerous than anything the 3 Drav escorts had prepared for, moved to intercept within minutes, forming a tight defensive perimeter around Terra Station's approach corridors. Hope, monitoring every channel she could reach, relayed updates to Rin in a calm, steady voice, even as the tension in the small cockpit stretched thin enough to feel. "Compact vessels, Halyard and Meridian Star, have moved to intercept position," Hope reported. "The 3 Drav escorts have been ordered to stand down and hold position, or be fired upon. They are slowing." "Are they going to fight?" Rin asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I do not believe so," Hope said. 3 lightly armed escort vessels against a full compact border squadron, this deep inside Sol territory, with council authorization already granted. That is not a fight any competent commander would choose. I believe they came expecting a quiet extraction, not a battle. I do not think they are prepared for what they have found instead." She was right. Within 10 minutes, the 3 Drav vessels came to a full stop, and one of them opened a channel, not to fight, but to surrender the attempt entirely, disavowing any connection to unlawful private action by rogue Combine citizens, a claim so transparent that even Dovenel's own aides, questioned separately aboard the now locked-down Vess Arbiter, could not maintain it under Compact Security's careful, patient questioning. By the time the sun set over the valley where Marcus and Elena's house stood, though of course, aboard a space station, there was no true sunset, only the artificial cycling of the lights toward evening, Karsh Dovenel had been formally stripped of diplomatic protection by his own Combine government, eager to distance itself publicly from an embarrassing and clumsy abduction attempt against a child under full Compact legal protection. He was detained aboard the Vess Arbiter, pending a joint inquiry, and the 3 escort vessels, along with their crews, were held for questioning under Compact border law. The Combine, facing the possibility of a genuine diplomatic incident far larger and more damaging than one lost hearing over a single mining asset, issued a quiet, carefully worded statement within 2 days, formally withdrawing all claims related to the miner formerly registered at Kethis Reach, and expressing regret for the unauthorized actions of individual Combine citizens acting outside official sanction. It was not an apology, not really, but it was, Judge Halverson said, watching the statement come through on her data slate, close enough to a surrender that I'm willing to call this finished. Rin heard all of this secondhand, in pieces, over the following days, sitting curled on the floor of her room, with Elena's dog Bosun pressed warm against her side, while Dr. Osei explained, patiently and gently, exactly what had happened, and exactly what it meant. "It's over," Dr. Osei told her, on a quiet afternoon almost a week later, sunlight coming soft and gold through the window in a way that Rin had, in 6 short months, come to genuinely love. Not just the hearing, all of it. "The Combine has no claim on you, no legal path to reach you, and after what happened with those escort ships, I do not think any government in this sector is going to want to test the Compact's patience over a child's safety again anytime soon." Rin was quiet for a long moment, scratching gently behind Bosun's ears. "I keep waiting to stop being afraid," she said finally. "I thought, once it was over, the fear would just go away. It doesn't work like that. Not all at once," Dr. Ose said. "Fear like yours doesn't disappear the moment the danger does. It takes time. It takes feeling safe, over and over, for long enough that your body starts to believe it, even after your mind already knows it. That's normal, Rin. That's not you being broken. That's just what healing actually looks like, day after day, instead of all at once." Rin nodded slowly, and for the first time in a long while, that answer did not disappoint her. It simply felt true. In the weeks after the standoff, word of what had happened at Terra Station spread further than anyone at Marcus and Elena's quiet house had expected. It was not the kind of story that made loud headlines across the Compact's core worlds. No battles had been fought, no ships destroyed, but among the smaller, outer territories, the ones like Kethis Reach that lived every day under the shadow of larger, harsher powers, the story traveled quickly and quietly, passed along dockworker to dockworker. The way important stories always seem to find their way to the people who need to hear them most. A human council had refused, publicly, completely, to trade a child's freedom for convenient shipping lanes, and when a diplomat had tried to take her anyway, the Compact had answered with force enough to make the attempt look foolish within the hour. Sova heard the story nearly 4 months later, from a trader passing through Kethis Reach who had heard it from someone else 3 stops back, and though the details had blurred and changed a little with each retelling, the shape of it stayed the same. The small, quiet girl who used to share the sleeping room near the recycling plant had gotten away, truly away, and something out there, some group of powerful strangers, had decided she was worth protecting. Sova did not know, for certain, that the girl in the story was Rin, but she hoped it, quietly, every night for a long while after, and kept the hope folded up small and careful, the same way Rin had once kept dried fruit hidden in her pocket, just in case. It took 2 more years, and no small effort from Judge Halverson, Dr. Ose, and a newly energized Compact Labor Inspection Office, eager to prove the Kethis hearing had meant something lasting, before conditions at Kethis Reach changed enough, and inspections became frequent enough, that indentured children began, one by one, to be formally released from their labor contracts. Sova was among the first. She did not go to Earth. Her ties, by then, were to a small trading community 2 systems over, where she had found work and something like a found family of her own. But she wrote to Rin once conditions allowed it, a short, careful letter that took 3 months to arrive, thanking her for a kindness Rin had not even known, at the time, that she was capable of giving. Proof, simply by surviving and being seen, that escape was possible at all. Years passed the way years do, quickly, in memory, though each individual day had felt, at the time, like its own small mountain to climb. Rin grew taller, though Cathari grew more slowly than humans, and by the time she was old enough to be considered nearly an adult by her own species standards, she had spent more years on Earth than she had ever spent on Kethis Reach. She kept her room at Marcus and Elena's house long after most humans her age would have moved on, not because she could not have moved, but because Elena's bread still smelled the same every evening, and because Bosun, and then Bosun's successor, a younger dog named Compass, still slept pressed against her feet at night, and because some kinds of safety, once found, were worth holding on to for as long as they were offered. She studied, eventually, the same field Dr. Ose had built her own life around. Not exactly psychology, but something closer to it, something the Compact called cross-species trauma law, built specifically around cases like her own, children and adults of any species, rescued from bondage or abuse across the many territories the Compact now touched. She was, by the time she reached her 20th year on Earth, one of the field's youngest recognized experts, called in more than once to advise on cases eerily similar to her own, other frightened children arriving on strange ships, other overseers who believed a person's worth could be measured in credits. She still flew with hope whenever she could arrange it, sitting sometimes in the pilot's chair that had once been far too big for her and was now simply the right size, listening to the ship's calm, familiar voice, the way some people listen to old songs. "Do you remember," Rin asked once, years later, sitting in that chair on a quiet supply run out toward the border, "what you told me, the first night, about why you decided to help me?" I remember every word of it, Hope said. I told you that I was built by humans to protect people who could not protect themselves, and that this included strangers on a road. I did not understand it then, Rin said. I thought you meant it was your programming, something you had to do. And now? Rin smiled, looking out at the stars, more of them than she had ever imagined existed. The same stars that had once carried her, frightened and starving, away from everything she had ever known. Now I think it was never programming at all, she said. I think it was just who you chose to be, the same as it was for Dale, and Marcus and Elena, and Dr. Osei, and Judge Halverson, and Chancellor Reyes. Nobody made any of you help me. You all just decided to. Yes, Hope said, and there was something in her voice that might have been pride, or might have been something even simpler than that, the quiet satisfaction of a promise, made a long time ago in a small dark maintenance space, that had been kept every single day since. That is exactly what happened. Somewhere far behind them, on a cold station orbiting a gray rock that had once been a moon, Kethis Reach continued its work, though under considerably stricter compact oversight now, and with a labor inspection division that visited far more often than the Combine found comfortable. The old overseer Tarn was long gone, quietly removed from his post not long after the hearing that had made his operations practices a matter of very public interstellar record. Nobody at the station spoke his name anymore. Dr. Osei retired from active fieldwork eventually, though she stayed close, visiting the hillside house every few months, watching with quiet pride, as the frightened child who once could not accept a hand offered to help her stand, had grown into someone who now offered that same hand to others, over and over, without ever once needing to be asked twice. You did the hard part yourself, she told Rin once, near the end of one such visit. I only ever sat on the floor beside you. You were the one who decided, every single day, to keep getting back up. You made it possible to believe getting up was worth it, Rin had answered. That is not a small thing to give someone. I would not be sitting here without it. And somewhere ahead of them, waiting at the end of every supply run, was a green hillside, a warm house, a dog curled by the door, and a family that had chosen her, not because they had to, not because any law demanded it, but simply because, on the day a frightened child stumbled into an empty docking bay, looking for somewhere to hide, an entire chain of humans, one after another, had decided that helping her mattered more than anything else in the world. Rin had come to Earth expecting, at best, to be tolerated, and at worst, to be handed back the moment it became inconvenient. What she had found instead was harder to explain to anyone who had not lived it, and simpler, in the end, than any legal argument or trade treaty could ever capture. She had found people who, when a stranger's child needed help, simply could not imagine doing anything else. And that, more than any ruling from any council, was the thing that finally, fully, let her believe she was truly home.